Hi, Kat here for Lightwave Digital. In this video, we're going to talk about DP Verdure, a plugin that's been in existence for about 15 years, maybe a little bit longer. Originally made available by Dennis Pontonnier, it is now part of Lightwave 2015, and what it does is things like trees, grass, and leaves, that sort of bit. So we're going to go through a basic tutorial here on how to create a tree using these tools. If you don't already have these tools available to you in your menus, go to Edit Menu Layout, and type in DP for short. And you should see the foliage tool, grass tool, and tree tool. And you can, of course, create a place for these. I actually have a menu group that's here, and you can plug them in just by dragging and dropping them into a section. And then when you're done, hit done, and you're good to go. All right, before we can actually make a tree, we need something as a helper object to help us out with the shape of the branches that grow from the trunk of the tree. So let's go to a background layer here and create a ball of sorts. And we'll just make sure that we're centered here. Hitting A on the keyboard to do so. And I'm just going to hold down the control key and create a sphere if necessary. I would suggest hitting the N key to bring up the numeric value box for this tool, and make sure that you're on tessellation rather than globe. Tessellation seems to work a lot better for something like this. And give yourself a few more segments, and you can hit enter and drop that tool. Now, I'm going to just push this ball up into the positive Y space a little bit here, and then I'm going to go and proceed to delete a portion of this ball. So with the T tool dropped, if you need to drop any tool that was previously selected, just click up in this area and double click it, and it's going to go away, or you can click down here and it'll also drop that tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right mouse select a bunch of these bottom polygons, and I'm going to be kind of random about the selection, and then I'm going to just delete using the delete key. So I'm going to just pull a few more off manually, maybe a couple over here. Sure, that one's gone, giving us a pretty randomized shape. Now that we've got something like that, we can go to the foreground layer, and the creation of this background object will make a lot more sense once we activate the tool. So using the kind of half deleted sphere randomly as a background layer, in the foreground layer, we can now actually activate DP tree. We're going to hit N and bring up that numerical toolbox. And we're going to make sure that we've got interactive tree on. And you can see that the tool has actually produced a tree where the branches are reaching and grounding out, so to speak. Think of it as an electric kind of shock or a lightning bolt from the base of the ground, and the tree shoots up and hits the ball, and its shape is largely determined by the points that were in the background on this mesh. So essentially we now have something that's reached for the sky and then used that background layer as a limiter to where it contacts it, then it kind of stops. Now, we obviously have some additional options here that'll help us change the height of this so that we can make it a little bit more random. You can see that it's already given us a little bit of branching just off the edges, but we can add a little bit more to it. I'm not going to go through all of these options because there's another section to this that I want to cover, and that's the foliage bit, which gives us leaves, and we won't have time for that in this video if I get into that. But let's go through the next tab here. So end branch shift is what I'm after, so I can kind of randomize this a little bit, and increase the line to normal, and let's just take a little bit more variation on the segments here. All right. Bring this up a little bit more. Play around with some of these settings just to give it a little bit more randomness. And over in the File tab, there's a function here for roots and, of course, branchlets. Now, what are branchlets? Branchlets are the little young branches that are just starting to grow off the ends of an older branch. And you have the options of using off, up, down, which is the default, right, left, side, or all. And you can see the changes to the shape of the tree as we go through each one of those. Now, I don't really need that much coverage of these branchlets, so I'm going to drop that down a little bit, and I can maybe bring up their length a little bit more, just so that when we do activate the foliage tool, we've got some little bits that hang off of it as leaf placement. So branch distribution is another function that's in the More tab. Um, we can obviously change this around, creating pretty much an endless number of trees with the variability of the background layer being a factor. Change the segment angle filter level. Just gives us a little bit more variation. Let's bring in some more variation here. Okay, let's go to the main tab again. And actually, one more thing. Under the miscellaneous tab, we've got a roots number. 0 means off. And in order to have any kind of roots in here that make any sense, we need to start with a minimum number of 4. This will give us a root system just underneath of the tree going and extending into the negative y-axis. So we can increase this. Okay. And we can drop the gravity a little bit so it looks a little bit more like a tree that's grown outwards. We can reduce the root system number, deviation, and I think we can give ourselves a little bit more branching here. There we go. All right, so this is pretty much a tree that is more or less ready to go. We can do very interesting things like bending the trunk deviation. You can do all kinds of very interesting looks to a tree like this. So if you're looking for one of those weeping willows or maybe a mangled oak tree or something that you might find desolate in the middle of the African plains, possibly along those lines, you can start playing around with the various functions inside of the main once you get yourself a good shape first. Now, you don't necessarily have to use a sphere as a background object like I've done here. You can use other shapes, but they all should be working with connected polygons and points. And if you do choose to use a subdivided object that subpatch, the subpatch points will be the locations of where these branches will reach out to and then effectively get grounded out and then start to stop. So once we've got this, one other thing that I want to make sure that you understand is that there are different modes to how this can be viewed. If you don't need a super high-end tree, you can go and change the look of the display for each one based off of these 3 modes. There's line, polygon, and then subdivided. So if you're doing a really, really complex tree and you're finding you're dealing with a slower system, maybe you're not working on the greatest workstation, or maybe you're on your laptop and you need to make some trees, this is a really good set of options so that you can go through and make the best choice possible. When you are ready though, hit make tree and we should be good to go. Let's just go one layer here, view, and we can check out what it's produced. Now, when it does this operation, the tool is smart and will display and generate weight maps, but in order for them to actually show, you need to select a weight map. So let's go and choose, for example, branch level. Okay, so this is going to help when we generate our leaves. So the red areas will get leaves and the blue areas will get less, if not none. Once we have our tree, we can now move over to DP Foliage, which will be our leaf generator. So we're going to activate that tool. We're going to make sure that it comes up using the numeric button. And I've already plugged in some numbers here in preparation of making this video so that we'd have something to look at right off the bat that kind of makes sense. But I'll go through some of these settings here just to give you a really good basis of understanding how to generate leaves once you have your tree created. if you have a powerful computer and you really want to see what's going on with the amount of leaves that are going to be actually generated through this tool, your preview number should be set to match whatever your leaves number is. In this case, 1500. And you can see that we get a population of trees on here. Now you can really drive this really hard with a computer that has capability for doing so. But if you're working on your laptop and you just want to like bang something really, really quickly, you don't need to see every single leaf. You can just pop into something that's a little bit more reasonable, like 250, and it'll give you an indication of where these things are just as a general guide. But if you've got the machine to do it, knock yourself out and punch those numbers. All right, so this is a little bit better. We've got some other additional values here. Seed is just a randomization factor for whatever you're working with. And we are going to be using the branch level as the placement weight map for these leaves. You can also use branch fineness should you wish to, but this will generate little buds or little leaves pretty much all the way through the trunk and branch elements without really paying any consideration to the points. However, there are times where maybe you're doing vines or something like that where that makes a lot of sense. But for our purposes, we're going to need the branch level at 100% weight. And that's what's controlling this is we have a weight map that's in here. The darker red areas are the locations where we are going to get the foliage to generate on. And that's controlled by two factors here. We have map coverage, so let's go 50%. And you can see that by changing the value of this, using the weight map as the input, you'll get more density of those leaves instead of it spreading out all those leaves across the weight map entirely, looking for everything that it possibly can. There are some drawbacks to using this value. You'll find that anything that was generated in here that doesn't have at least a certain percentage value that's on the geometry based off of that map won't get any leaves. So you might want to make sure that this is pushed up a little bit more. And then, of course, leaf distribution. If you're working with something like vines or a tree that has leaves that kind of sprout out pretty much anywhere, the leaves distribution value will help spread it across regardless of the total map coverage or work in conjunction with that map coverage parameter. Different iteration numbers will allow you to randomize things based off of simple value. And now let's get to leaf type. If you're just doing something really, really fast, tri leaves are going to be the quickest. However, I find that they are the most difficult to map a leaf onto. But you can just color them green, make them sort of look pretty in the surface editor. For a tree that's in the background, you can totally get away with this. Don't have to do anything more sophisticated than that. Otherwise, you're going to be wanting to look at quads if you can actually texture map with a leaf on top of it. But when I go and do trees, I generally like to use the 2x quad or 2 times quad because these will allow for a little bit of shape to them. And by shape I mean curvature because it is a subpatched object and it's kind of split up. The leaf is going to actually bend when it's subpatched enabled, so you get the curve, the natural curve that you would have for a real leaf. Leaf scale can be obviously driven 0 to 100. If you try to pop in a larger value, you can, but the software is limited in terms of the slider to 0 to 100. You can also add a variability factor of plus or minus whatever the leaf scale is. So you can do very large leaves and then say cut it in half or go even further. Something like this. Probably look pretty good. Leaf bend. If you're trying to match what time of day it might be, or perhaps the seasons, and you need to bend these leaves towards a particular sunlight source, or based off the season, maybe they face a certain direction. There's the control for that. So once this is done, got my variability in here. We're going to make foliage. And right now, currently, they are all selected. And I'm just going to hit the tab key. And you can see that when this was generating the leaves, it just dropped them on top of there. So we need to get the leaves to be sub-tabbed as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the tree, which gives us that. I'm going to cut it out of there for a second, pop it into an empty layer, go back to the leaves layer, hit tab for these, and then we can go and grab our tree. So Control X this back out of here and Control V. This will make sure that everything is sub-patched, and whatever we've got in here will have a nice curved leaf. Go on the ends here, and then we can proceed to the next step, which would be to texture this. However, that's going to be something that I'll have to cover in a separate video. All right, well, this is the two tree tools, foliage and tree, that will give you a lovely tree like this very, very quickly, just using a couple of simple guides. Make sure to always clean up your models. When you're done, make sure you save it. And you're good to go.